Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Delight in the Limelight show. I'm Linda Ugolo, and today's conversation is going to be especially juicy if you want to use speaking to grow your business or your thought leadership, but hate the idea of sounding salesy. I'll never forget hearing someone give a 5-minute talk that was so clear, so grounded, so compelling that I ended up hiring her. And that is the power of speaking when it's done right. It connects, it builds trust, and it moves people to action, which is why I'm so excited to be joined today by Lorie-Ann Murabito. Lorie-Ann is a former painfully shy gal turned professional speaker, a 2-time best-selling author, and the host of the Be in Demand podcast. She helps coaches, consultants, and service providers create talks that do the selling for them so they can attract the clients without ever feeling like they are pitching. So welcome, Lorie-Ann. I'm so happy that we're diving into this.
Linda, I am so excited to be here. We've known each other a very long time and both have had podcasts for a long time. And now we're finally crossing that. You're like,
I
hey,
know
come on my show.
we're finally live streaming
Yeah.
together. It's so fun. So, before we dive into stuff, I was thinking how curious I was about some part of your speaker journey. Like, who are the influences for you? Like, you coach people in creating these talks and, of course, delivering them as well. But what are some of your external influences or influencers on your journey that
On
kind of
my
like moved
journey.
you? Yeah.
I'm trying to think of who was I admiring when I first started? But I think I was just so I would just watch each speaker very differently. Like, what did I like? What did I not like? What resonated with me? Um, what what is it that I might be able to emulate with my audience and in my speeches that would still bring out my authenticity? So I almost looked at it as permission to have fun. So one of them that comes to mind is John Maxwell. So John actually does you can just see his style in his various talks, but you can also see how he uses a lot of the same stories, same jokes. And that gave me a lot of permission of, oh, I could talk about that. Meaning like stuff from my personal life, and you bring it into your speech. And what happens? The audience gets to know you. So I'm really one of those people that I look at a lot of different people. And what do I like? What do I dislike? Where did I really connect with them and feel like they're my friend? I feel like I know them.
Wow. So would you say that what you created and the way you help people, you've completely developed on your own without taking any speaking? Like, I've taken like 7 to 9 speaking programs.
Yes. I would say, I was also a member of National Speakers Association. I know a lot of speakers who actually teach speaking and speech writing. So I've taken a lot of their programs, but what I did was I also blended in my obsession with neuroscience. Like, what really happens to people? What is the audience thinking? So I really weaved in a lot of that as I came up with my own methodology on how to put together a speech. And for me, there's 7 different blocks that you're putting together. And that's essentially exactly how I help my clients to craft a speech that they're proud of, instead of, okay, we're going to build a speech together. It's like, all right, we're going to work on this first block. And here's what we need. And here's what we need to do first. Now, Linda, I'm going to share this with you, and anybody out there who has ever spoken, and the person that's speaking before you goes overtime, and you're the person just before lunch. What happens? The meeting planner comes up to you and says, the person before you is 15 minutes over and we got to get back on track. And you're like, after you is lunch. Can you take out 15 minutes? This has happened to clients of mine. This has happened to me. You got to know where to take that 15 minutes out, that 10
So you
minutes
just take
out.
out a block?
You'll know which section to take out. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So you've got 7 blocks. Do they have names? Can you just list them?
They do have names. Okay. So the first one is basically, you're going to set the goals. Okay, you're going to set the goal for your presentation. So this is to me is part of your foundation. What is the goal for you as the speaker? What do you want to get out of this, delivering this presentation? The next goal is, what do you want the audience to get out of it? So this is basically going to become our North Star. We want to make sure that we stay on target with our goals. Okay. So there's a block. The second block is also, what's your speaker style? Now, this is something that once you decide on what your speaker style is, you don't really have to really do this block again and again. But
can you give an example of what speaker styles are?
Yeah. And this came from in my leadership days. I would, when I was coaching, high-end leaders, I would just be like, what's your style? And what I noticed, a lot of my coaching clients, they'd be like, well, that person is kind of like this and that got them there. So maybe that's what I have to be. And I'm like, no, like people are following you because of you, not because of that other person. So let's come up with your style of leadership. And so I carry that into writing speeches. What kind of speaker do you want to be? Do you want to be funny, humorous, down to earth, all professional? Like I started off like wearing the suit and the heels. And then I realized I didn't like wearing the same jacket and skirt or pants at the same time. Like I like a dress, but still monochromatic. Like what is your style? Like even the way that you dress on stage is part of your style and how you show up. A friend of mine shows up in a jeans and a jacket. That's his style. I've also had clients who don't like to wear shoes on stage. That's part of their style. Yes. I usually have to tell them, I'm just like, okay, that's something that you're going to have to address because the audience is going to be like, why isn't she wearing any shoes? I was like, that's something that you have to say. You have to address that because
you have to address it. It's like the elephant in the room.
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. And the audience is going to be thinking about that instead of listening to you. And the most important thing is to get people to listen to you. Mm-hmm. So, all right, now let's move on to the blocks that are in your speech. And this is where you would remove blocks. Your opening. Your opening is designed to get people to put their phones down and lean into you. But here's what happens after that. The audience naturally, this is the neuroscientist in me, they naturally cross their arms and they sit back and they're starting to think, yeah, but why should I listen to you? And that's where your authority section comes in. And an authority section is not some dry resume, your LinkedIn bio. It needs to be conversational. Like for mine, it would be if we've never met before. I'm a reformed, painfully shy girl who accidentally said yes to a speaking event. And it goes on a little bit more, but it's very conversational. And what you learn is, oh, she used to be shy. Oh, me, I would consider myself to be shy too. Oh, she's got 25 years of public speaking experience. And I would also mention some of the companies that I've worked with. So that builds that authority. So what happens? The audience leans back in and says, okay, this person is worth listening to. Then we want to transition into the meat of your presentation. And this is where you have 3 different blocks. We're talking about 3 different tips. And you'll be able to cover those 3 in a typical 45 to 55 minute presentation. And each of those tips that you are sharing with the audience has 3 supporting pieces of data. That can be a case study. It can be a story. It can be a metaphor. It can be, a case study like about your clients, about the industry. And so you would have those 3 different pieces of data for each of your 3 points. And then you want a call to action. Everybody who is hiring a speaker or bringing in a speaker, they want to deepen the learning for the audience. You're not just a storyteller. What is that next step that you want that audience to take? So there's your call to action. And again, we're making sure that we stay in alignment with the goal for the audience and the goal for you. And then you close your presentation with a beautiful bow that makes people stand up and give you a standing ovation. And if you have like the 3 C's, I say like the 3 C's lead to the 3 R's. If you are compelling, captivating, and most importantly, converting your audience, then you'll get the 3 R's, which is we want our audience raving about us, remembering us, and referring us.
I like that. 3 C's and the 3 R's. That's so cool. So the blocks aren't the 7 blocks of the actual talk. It's the context of the talk
Yes, like
for you and the
there's 7.
audience,
Yeah.
and then the actual building blocks of the talk. And I
Yeah.
love the 3 pieces with the 3 supporting evidence, the opening and the closing. It really simplifies it.
Yes, and it makes it also easier to craft that presentation,
Mhm.
and also, like, I wanna write a second presentation. I think my opening can still work for this second talk.
Mhm.
My authority section most likely will stay the same,
Mhm.
but I'm gonna change most of the meat of the presentation.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah. It makes me, of course, I'm thinking about my own keynotes and how it does or doesn't fit into this. I mean, I have my framework of the inner freedom framework. So those are my
Mhm.
3 teaching points,
Yeah.
clearing the fear of speaking and your mindset and repatterning your habits. My authority section, I think, probably is inside my origin story because in that I mention my past experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, but I don't name the things that I'm doing now, but I do bring in case studies or, you know,
Mhm.
clients I work with. So I guess it has the elements, but maybe not necessarily the exact structure.
Yeah, you call it something
I
different.
call it something
Your
different. Yeah,
origin story, it's your authority section. It's like how you got here.
that's true.
Yeah.
And that does give me authority because they see what I did that was different.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Exactly.
That's so cool. Um, so the call to action.
Mm.
I mean, we're talking about like how do we give a talk and convert without sounding salesy? What are the elements that do convert?
Well, Linda, you and I have podcasts, and I always, like, we can refer people to our podcasts. So here's the thing, associations, like, I'll just pick on associations, chamber events, they have gotten burned at some point, where they booked a speaker, the speaker came in and gave a 45-minute infomercial. And what happens is the members complain. Like, I came here for education and I had to listen to this. Like, I could have stayed up at 2 in the morning and watched, like, cable and saw my own infomercial. So a lot of different associations will say you can't pitch. You can't promote your services. You can't, they're thinking of their members. Rotaries are also notorious for this as well. Well, guess what? I have sold more books at Rotary events than probably than any other place that I've ever spoken for. And
I wanna hear more about that.
I made it a win-win for them because my book is my best business card. And
Uh-huh.
people aren't going to throw away a book, but they'll accidentally lose or throw away a business card. So this is what I did. In the speaking world, we say everyone's got a 20 in their pocket. That's, like, talk about mindset. That's just a mindset shift. Everyone has a 20 in their pocket. So my book does sell for $15 on Amazon, but if I'm in person and I have copies of it, we'll just sell them for $20. What I did with the Rotary was my very first Rotary that I did this at, I told them, I said, I do have copies of my book, and I know that your polio foundation is one of your biggest nonprofit, like, they're on a mission to really
Right,
eradicate
they're
polio.
always supporting
Yes.
some mission, all the time.
Yes.
Mhm.
So what I said to them was, if it's okay with you, if I can promote my book at the end, and for every copy that I sell, I'll donate half, $10, to your polio foundation. They said yes. So the very next time I spoke at a Rotary, I just told them, I said, I've done this with other Rotaries. And they just said, yeah, go right ahead. And so I just kept doing that. So I sold so many books because as soon as you mention, like, because the way that I would bring it up is, I'm like, I hear you guys are really big into this polio thing. And so for every copy of my book that I sell here today, I'm going to write a check towards your polio foundation for $10 for every book that's sold. And so I'll have people like 10, 15, 20 people that would line up and buy a book. And then I would personalize it for them. So even those organizations that say no pitching, no selling, if you can make it a win-win for them. So that's one particular situation. When I am speaking, I really want to get people in OPA, other people's audiences. I want to bring them into my world. So I do love to use my podcast as something that does that. So instead of, hey, go sign up for this lead magnet, unless it's appropriate for that particular situation in that organization, I love to refer people to my podcast. Now, typically what happens is during the Q&A portion of my talk, there's a lot of the same questions. And I'm sure you get a lot of very similar questions when you're speaking, Linda.
Mhm.
So I recorded podcast episodes about those questions so that when somebody said, yeah, but I'm really new and I don't have a website, like I have a story to say, okay, so a meeting planner comes to your website and they don't see that you have a speaker page on your website. Guess what happens? They go away. But you need to get started someday. So how about we make today that day? Go listen to episode 197, which is the 7 essentials that you need to have on your webpage. And then somebody else will ask a question. Well, how do I get started? I've never done this before. Oh, I've got a podcast episode. Go listen to. And it's funny, I literally can give people the exact number to the podcast episode. And I look at it as like I'm really serving them and anybody else who writes down the number. I can spend 15 to maybe 30 seconds answering your question, or you can go download that episode and in 15 minutes do a nice deep dive on that topic.
Yeah,
but I've brought them into my world and they get to
Mhm.
know me better.
Yes. Although one thing that they won't have is to be on your email list.
Well, in the podcast episode, I'm going to talk about here, get on the email list. Here's
Yes. So, but it's another step in between. Although,
Yes.
when I don't know if you noticed, and I haven't gone back to listen to this PodFest session on Substack. Did you come across the Substack session?
I did not go to the Substack session, and I do know that they are allowing podcasts.
Yes. And what it does is that the people then who subscribe to your podcast, you get their email. So it's like a combination of a podcast subscription and an email subscription at the same time. I purchase all the recordings.
Yes.
Because I wanted to listen to that one specifically. It's on my to-do list.
It's on your
Still haven't done it.
And it's a good way just to repurpose the newsletters, the emails that we do send out. I think it's a brilliant idea. I have not done this. I haven't really looked into it, but maybe I should. Thank you very much for the little nudge.
Yeah, well, there's so many, we're always learning all the time. Like I just learned, I love that you brought up the Rotaries. In fact, I wanted to ask you next about what are some of the easy speaking opportunities that you're aware of? Because Rotaries, before COVID, there was someone in my local business women's group. I don't know if you're part of Boston Business Women's Network. Anyway, I was in their website and someone said, hey, are there any speakers here? I'm interested in representing you and kind of being an agent. And I thought she would get a ton of responses. I was the only person who raised my hand. So I hired her, and I had just listened to somebody not too much earlier about this idea of doing 50 talks in 50 weeks. And she said, if you do 50 talks in 50 weeks, even if they're free, it will put you on a whole new level and you start getting paid. I don't know, that was her spiel.
I agree with that.
You do? Okay, that's so cool. Well, anyway, I thought I wasn't getting around to setting those things up, but she did. And she got me gigs at Rotary clubs, at libraries, and college student groups and chambers. And I got up to 35 before COVID happened. And then, of course, I had to cancel the remainder. Right. But so are those the areas that you recommend? Are there things that
Rotaries are a great place to speak? Okay. So first off, especially if you're a seasoned speaker, they're used to, because they have to have a speaker for every single meeting. And you can go to rotary.org. I can't exactly remember the name of their website, but I tell people, and you just plug in, what's your zip code? And Linda, I did an entire episode on the 10 benefits of speaking at Rotaries.
Okay, I'm going to check that out.
and how to, and it's one of my speaker circles, so you can sort of identify it. Um, I have a strategy because I went down to Florida. My husband and I have a place down in West Palm Beach. And a number of years ago, this was like early on in our marriage, he said, let's spend the winter down in Florida. And I said, okay. He's like, well, we might have to come back and forth. I said, I said, once I go down there, like I'm going to go down there and I'm going to book speaking events. I wanted to get known in the area. I spoke at 30 Rotaries within 3 months from, like mid-January to like mid-March or something like that, all the way from north of West Palm Beach, all the way down to Fort Lauderdale. And I came up with a process how I figured out which Rotaries to speak for and when you should say, not that week, but the week, I'm available the week after. Like never speak on a holiday week. Because if there's a Monday holiday, for example, that means everybody who's there is actually trying to cram 5 days worth of work into 4 days. So chances are the Rotary is going to be something that they're going to skip and they'll go to like another Rotary or something. So that's one of the tips is, and I also share with people like in that episode, how to actually find the right Rotary. Like you want to look up where they're going to be. Why do I know this? Because I spoke at a diner at 5 p.m. and it was filled with retirees. Okay. People that weren't going to hire me and couldn't even refer me to any other place. It was more like a social club. So, but I also spoke at the West Palm Beach, which was at the convention center, and had 250 professional business owners and also people that were in corporate. I mean, like that was I sold a lot of books at that one.
Yeah, I was going to ask. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I have like a whole process, but they need speakers. And what's also the benefit of speaking at Rotaries is there's business owners and business leaders that are in the audience, and they can either bring you into their own companies or refer you to other places. So this always brings us back to the key thing, Linda, between you and I is be outstanding on the stage.
Yeah. And so at a Rotary Club, you don't have 45 minutes. You have 20 probably.
20. So the like when I was sharing that you'll share like 3 tips and 3 pieces of information, you don't have time for all that. You might do 2 tips and 2 pieces of information supporting data for those 2 tips. And well, if you want to learn more, like you can always like sign up for this lead magnet, or here's my book, etc., or this podcast. I didn't have a podcast back then, but there's lots of ways just to keep referring people to keep them in your world.
Yeah. Well, what are some other ways that you kind of seed, your work inside a talk so that it doesn't sound salesy?
So that it's got to be conversational. And what I mean by conversational is you might be talking about a leadership tip, for example. Well, in my talk, and you would name the title, like, speaking tips for CEOs, I dived into this a little bit deeper. And so you're just kind of breezing over it. But what does the audience start to think? Like they're sitting there like, oh, she's more than just speak and stand out. Like this presentation. Oh, she's also a coach. Oh, she also does this program called In-Demand Signature Speech. Now, I've done it already a couple of times earlier here when I was like mentioned a couple of podcast episodes. I mean, I just said it very conversational in a story.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But letting people know like, oh, one of my clients, after she gave her in-demand signature speech, she stepped off the stage to 26 paid speaking opportunities.
Whoa.
Yeah, I know. Whoa. She did call me after that. And the question was, now what do I do?
Exactly. What's the next step?
Yeah. And I was like, here's what you're going to do next.
It's a good problem to have. Really good problem to have. Yes. I like that. And I feel like that's something that, it takes, I don't know if it's that, if I am representative of many people, but for me, it's taken me a while to get used to that idea of saying, when I worked with this client who is a COO of a tech startup in New York City, or, my client from Microsoft, or, so like that it gives people an idea of a context of the the world that, or the field that you work inside of?
It is awkward at first,
Mhm.
just like my very first talk was awkward and like I kind of stumbled over things, but I did it. I got my first rep in as, like I recently interviewed John Lee Dumas on my podcast. And that was something that I asked him. It's like, like your first talk, he got some not so lovely feedback afterwards. And I said, but what kept you going? Why did you do the next one? He said, perspective. He said, I'd never done any public speaking on a stage before. Why would I expect myself to be good? And
Yeah.
I love that. And it's the same thing with these little seeds, these little phrases that sound conversational. The more that you start doing this, the easier it gets.
Yeah.
Like I've been doing it for so long now that it just naturally comes out. And I've done like some virtual events and I'll start to explain like, yeah, don't worry, I'll share with you like how you can get my 17 magical phrases. And I've had people say, I want to know now because I know that you're doing this, but I just don't know how. And
Yeah.
it's, like it's cute, it's funny,
Yes.
but they realize that they're being drawn in.
Yeah.
Like, I want to know more.
Yes, that's really wonderful. And I think that's one of the things that I appreciated about my challenge of doing 50 talks in 50 weeks is that you feel it as a journey. And I always recommend to my students, like, if you're going to get on podcasts, get on 5, like book 5. If you're going to go to libraries, get 5 libraries so that you don't have like one that feels like it's the be all end all, because it's not. It's just the beginning. And we
Yeah,
do have to cultivate that beginner mindset all the time. I mean, even getting on camera, everything is a journey. And of course, we're going to get better as we go along. And that's why it's important to go along and not just try something out once. Like, what do we know from once?
we don't.
We don't know
We
much
don't
from
like
once.
like
Yeah.
do it again.
Yeah.
Do it
Do it again and do it
again.
again.
Do it again.
Yes. And do it with awareness. One of the things I'm working on right now is a speaker log and journal
Nice.
of things like, preparing yourself and what are the things you want to think about, including, what you brought up, but also, other more kind of personal development questions and prompts
Mhm.
and also the debrief. The debrief is so important. One of the things that I felt like I missed out on when I was doing those 35 is that I didn't have a system for reviewing what I had
Mhm.
just done. And of course, you do it naturally to some extent in your head. But I felt like if I had been more intentional about it, I could have made even better progress.
Yes, I 100% agree. And I was just sharing a story how I literally have a carry-on suitcase with everything that I could possibly need for in-person speaking events, for example. So I the other day I was pulling something out. I needed a clock for an in-person event that I was doing, and there's a belt in there. And I pulled out the belt and it reminded me of the reason why the belt is in there is because I have a speaker dress that I love to wear. I can crumple it up, stuff it in a carry-on, and it's just that sort of material that doesn't wrinkle. Well, I had a lapel microphone and there's no pockets on this dress. There was no place to put, the transmitter. So I had to hold it. That's why the belt is there now, so that I have a place to put it if that ever happens again,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm wearing that dress. And that only came because I thought about like, what do I wish had been different? What went well? What did I forget? And what do I want to make sure I have next time? And so that's why that belt got purchased and then stuffed in that suitcase so that I would have it in
That's
the
great.
future.
Yes,
Mhm.
and you would have you wouldn't have to hold that in your hand anymore.
Right. But, like,
Great idea.
things happen. Things
Great idea.
happen.
How much speaking do you do these days?
I would say at least between virtual and in person, about 3 a month. And the only
Oh.
reason why I know that number is I went for a walk earlier this morning, and I was actually thinking about this, like, how many times am I speaking? On average, it's about 3 a month.
Mhm. And that's exclusive, that's not including podcasts, or that is including podcasts also?
Well, I did not include this.
Mhm.
Yeah, so more virtual, more I would say like 2 out of 3 are virtual groups. There's
Mm-hmm.
somebody's membership or some sort of a mastermind, and at least one a month is some sort of in-person event,
Mm-hmm.
whether that's a university or like I recently spoke for the New England Podcasters Group.
Oh, cool.
Mhm.
Oh, did I miss that?
You did miss that, and I miss
Oh,
seeing you.
I'm so sorry. Bummer. Like, I know you had written me and say, I didn't see you at that meeting, and then I thought, "Why didn't I have it in my calendar?" I don't know why.
Second Saturday, don't miss next month.
Oh,
I think next month's gonna be good too. But as you know, like here brings up another speaking tip, and that is like as a speaker, I promoted it. I had 3 people that were coming. They weren't even members of the group. They were coming. And as a matter of fact, like 2 out of 3 of them are speakers, and the other one is somebody from Halt.
mhm.
And he's also does entrepreneurship programs like at Babson and MIT and Harvard. And I've spoken for his classes a number of times. So of course I wanted to bring him in so that he could just like see me speaking in a different environment other than a university, because
Mhm.
you just
Right.
never know.
Right. So circling back to like where to get speaking engagements. So we mentioned the Rotary Chamber, student groups, um, libraries, online programs. Would you
Mhm.
add? What else would you add?
I tell people to start with your warm market. I want you to make a list of all the Facebook groups, the memberships, the chamber, different association, professional trade groups. Just start thinking, making a list of all of these groups that you're already a member of. Then I want you to put check marks next to all the ones that actually bring in speakers. You've seen speakers, you've attended speakers. This also counts for list off all the different conferences that you attend yearly, quarterly, whatever it is. Just start making that list. If these are places that you normally show up, people already know, like, and potentially will trust you. So that if you approach them about what's the process for finding and booking speakers, please make a note. We are not saying book me. We are just gathering information. They will tell you what the process is. Oh, we only start, booking for our fall conference in the beginning of September. Okay. So now you have that information. So then you can have the next conversation, which would be about you potentially speaking for them once you know what the conference is all about. There might be a theme, and that's why storytelling is really, really not needed this year, because everybody's talking about AI or vice versa. And I say that because I had a client who her goal was to speak on the marketing cruise. She's a business storyteller, and she pitched herself. Crickets. Year 2, crickets. Year 3, crickets. 4th year, they reached out to her and said, "We'd like to have you come and speak." Now, what was the difference? She doesn't know, but apparently storytelling wasn't a big emphasis, not something that they wanted to focus on the other 3 years. But then finally, they wanted to bring in storytelling. So she was the main choice.
Mm-hmm.
You just never know why people are saying no.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What is you mentioned AI. What is your feeling about using AI in crafting your talk?
It scares me. Overall, it scares me. However, I do use it as a brainstorming partner. Like and I literally will tell it, like, here's what your role is. And this is what, and I give it the context. This is what I believe, is happening now. So for example, Linda, I'll tell you what I was actually using it for this morning. I believe we're about to go into a conference recession. And this is actually a beautiful time for people to be speaking for associations and getting in front of their ideal clients. So having been somebody who has survived 2 other conference recessions in 2020 and also 2008, so I had this conversation with AI about it because I want to share this information. But what it did is it gave me a couple of different perspectives and different angles that I hadn't thought about. One that I was just like, I don't think that's really needed right now. That's sort of a given. It was telling me that associations are now having other ways that they are hosting meetings, like virtually. And I was like, yeah, that's already a given now, the past 5 years, no kidding. So I was like, let's just get rid of that one. We're not going to talk about that. But it gave me a couple of other interesting angles. And I'm just like, okay, I like that. And it sort of goes in alignment with what I'm telling people to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I really mostly use it just as a brainstorming and also maybe to smooth the wrinkles in
Mm-hmm.
my emails. But
Mm-hmm.
it's not doing the work for me, because I
Right.
still want people to feel like they feel like Lorie-Ann's writing this. Lorie-Ann is like, this is Lorie-Ann on the podcast.
Yes, yes. Well, the other thing is that since you are going to be speaking this out loud, as you speak out loud, there are going to be changes that get made because it has to feel like it's something that you would say.
Yes.
And that's one
100%.
of the beauties of speaking, I think, is that it does make it more just as we hear it, we shift it to be something that feels in alignment with
Yeah,
us. Otherwise, we feel completely awkward, like this isn't how I would say something. One of the things I did that was very helpful is I was asked last year to create a speech about imposter syndrome,
Mhm.
overcoming imposter syndrome for startup founders. And I got help with that talk with somebody. And then I was asked to give a talk for mid-career change. What is it
Mhm.
called? When people are job seekers.
Okay.
And so I went into ChatGPT and I said, which parts of my talk would I need to personalize for this other group? And we identified together 3 places.
And it was probably 3 places that you might not have seen because you're so in your speech.
Right, right. And then I said, "Oh my gosh, so I do the same thing if I was speaking to college students?" And yep, we just took those 3 places and I felt delighted because I thought that is a time saver
Yes.
for me.
Yes.
And it's not like I will necessarily use that wording, but I know the spots that
Mhm.
I need to make it, address to what the concerns are of that group.
Yes. I was talking with somebody and she was saying how I don't like want to give it away too much with she was going to use Hey Jen, which is an AI that will actually present for you, like virtually make a video. And I went to check it out and I was like, she raved about this. And I went to check it out and I was just like, ooh, this still looks a little phony. And
What's
I,
phony mean? Phony?
phony, yeah, it
Phony.
just looked, it still looked computer generated.
Mm.
And I just don't think that, like AI can't replace this. It can't be a robot talking to a robot.
Mhm.
Like you and I are kind of, yeah, sure, we had a structure for the call, but we've gone in a couple of different directions because of something that I said or that you said, like you said something and now I'm sharing this about you. We weren't even planning on having this AI conversation, but I think it is something that to remind people that that's one of the huge benefits of speaking is how you really connect with people with your voice,
Mhm.
with your eye contact, with
Yeah.
the way that your tone, your pauses.
Mhm. I know
That's what
the whole way we
Mm,
express ourselves. I we all grew up with the idea if it's not what you say, it's how you say it. But
mhm.
there's very little talk, except among speaking coaches, about how you say things. And the whole range of, like, how do we explore this instrument we have, which
Yeah.
is such an exciting part, and the fun part, I think, of speaking is getting to express ourselves.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know, I have you mentioned the what is it called? The open the door method? Open the door to
Open the door to the
conversation?
conversation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
say something about that. What is that?
And this is like you've been in Facebook groups where somebody says, "Hey, I'm looking for a speaker, for my summit." And you get all these people who write me, 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 me. And it's just like, you don't know anything about the summit. They don't know anything about your topic or your expertise that you speak on. So I really like to open the door to the conversation. So this is something that I talk a lot about. You know, you're a member of a chamber. There's a conference that's coming up. Find out who's in charge of the conference. And again, you're just asking questions. I see that we're planning a conference. I was wondering, what is the process for finding and booking speakers? They're going to tell you what that process is. And it works very different than like, hey, I see we have a conference coming up and I speak on leadership, so maybe I could be one of the speakers. You send that in an email or you say that in front of somebody, they're going to be like, oh, I don't have anything to do with the planning. And they're not even going to tell you who that person is that you should be talking to. You send that as an email, it's just going to get thrown in the trash because we're all getting so many emails. So what if we sent an email that just says, I'm just gathering information? Because maybe I'm not the right person for this particular talk. But in order for me to know that, I'm just gathering information. Maybe there's a theme. Well, guess what? As a speaker, I know speakers. I might not be the right person, but I might be able to refer somebody to them. So I'm always trying to make that sort of connection as well for my speaker friends. But let's open the door to the conversation instead of saying, oh, you should book me when you know nothing about the event.
Mm-hmm. And people are much more likely to want to be helpful.
Yes. So I do this with the Rotaries. When I booked those 30 Rotaries, this is what I speak on. And I would have to let them know that I was a professional speaker so that they knew that somebody who's going to come in, would be able to, with quality, be able to address their particular Rotary Club. But I would also make sure that I wrote in there that I realize that they don't pay their speakers. And you're just inquiring, what is the process for finding and booking speakers for your weekly meetings? And if you can't figure out who the person is, if their title doesn't give away that they're the person to be reaching out to, always send it to the president. Mm-hmm. If the president likes what he just read, he's going to forward that email to the right person. Mm-hmm. And in the case of any association as well, if they like what they've read and you're just inquiring, they're just going to forward it to the right person. Mm-hmm. And you're going to get so much farther. And you're going to get great information. And this all kind of happened to me like in real life. I was introduced to somebody and he said to me, I'm sorry, and it was an event, a business event for the scrap metal. I was at an event with my husband who's in the recycling and waste industry. And I was going to make the most of being at that conference, which meant I was going to find somebody, going to see if I could get booked to speak somewhere. Somebody introduced me to somebody and he said, my business event, which was in 2 months, is already booked. The next question that you ask, which is what I asked him, when do you start booking for the following year? He said, November. I will reach out to you in November. He said, fantastic. And we exchanged business cards. He called me 2 weeks later because a speaker had dropped out. And my topic, my presentation fit in perfectly. He didn't even have to change the title of that session. It was just I slipped right in.
Wow, that's serendipity.
Yes. And that led to me speaking to 2 other events as well that I actually can follow. Yeah. And also a bunch of book sales because I sent a copy of my book to somebody that I had a conversation with, and then he ended up buying a copy for everybody in his leadership team. And he made me an Amazon bestseller that day.
Oh, that's so cool.
That's always
so
fun.
So cool. Yes, indeed. Yeah. One last question before we close up. TEDx Talks. Mm-hmm. What do you what's your attitude towards them? I mean, at one point it felt like it was a big cachet.
Everybody's doing them.
Yeah. What's your feeling about them these days?
I tell people, and I have not done one, but I've had lots of clients who have done them. And I will tell them the main thing is let's make the TED Talk work for your business. I want to make sure that they're in alignment with each other. That way, when you put it on your website, it's very congruent with everything else that you do. Now, I say this because I had a friend who she was an expert in market research. This is something she has personally interviewed thousands and thousands of people, and companies hire her to do this. She did a TED Talk on female friendships. I was like, you can't do anything with it. It's if you put it on your website, it's okay, you did a TED Talk on something that's not your expertise. So I always want to make sure, what do you want the TED Talk to do for your business? Now let's make sure, again, there's the goal, there's the North Star. Now let's craft the speech that goes along with that goal. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Great. So you still feel like it's worthwhile for people to pursue?
I think that there's a lot of people who they want to say that they did a TED Talk,
Mm-hmm.
and okay, you get to say that you did a TED Talk, but got to remember, like, when you do this, it's not your property either. Like,
Yeah.
that video is not yours. You can put it on your website, but it's not yours.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm usually asked the question, like, what do you hope that this will do for you?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's different today than it was 6 to 8 years ago.
Yeah, when it first started, it's very
Mm-hmm.
different.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
If giving a 15-minute presentation, like, you're probably memorizing that 15
Oh,
minutes.
definitely.
Our
Definitely.
45, 55-minute talks, I mean, like, I go off of bullet points
Mm-hmm.
because I know my stories,
Yeah.
but I want to be able to shift lanes if I need to, because I can see something in the audience. Yeah.
Well, that opens up a whole other conversation. Maybe we'll do this another time. Talk about, connecting with the audience and being on stage and all those other things. There's so many things so many directions we could go on. Lorie-Ann,
Absolutely.
thanks so much for coming on. This was really fun. I just felt like I personally gained a lot from it, and I am sure that people who watch the replay, if you came on live, thank you so much. And just want you to know that you can go from dread to delight when you are in the limelight. And if you want to get my speaker preparation checklist, you can go to my website, lindaugelo.com, UGELOW. You can message me. And Lorie-Ann, where can people get in touch with you?
Well, just hop on over to my website, which is speakandstandout.com, and you can follow me on your favorite social media platform of your choice. And my podcast is Be in Demand, and it's all about public speaking for coaches, consultants, and service providers.
Yes, so it's a perfect companion to the Delight in the Limelight podcast. These should be two on your regulars. So wishing everybody a wonderful week. Enjoy all the opportunities you have to open your mouth and speak. Thanks for coming on, Lorie-Ann.
Thanks for having me, Linda.
Bye.